Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome back, everyone. It is officially season 2 of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We've got a brand new theme song, as you just heard, and we're all ready to go and start preparing for next season, 2019. Here we come. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Ben, I am outstanding, man. Glad to be back, ready to go. Another season lays ahead of us. I know we have plenty of time to prepare, but the preparation starts now. So let's go, man. I can't wait. What we're about to do, I don't think is being done in the industry. You and I both talk about it. We're going to go back. We're going to review everything that we thought was going to happen this past season. We're going to see where we got things right, where we got it wrong, and why. And I can't wait to dig in, man. It's so interesting.
Absolutely. So just so everybody knows how this format's going to work, we're going to do just like we did before the season started, where we were previewing everything by division. We're going to go back and look at our preseason predictions by division and compare them to year-end results, and help you and help us understand and talk through why certain players finished where they did. So first up in the AFC East, we've got to start with the 17,000 time Super Bowl champions, New England Patriots. Congrats. Thanks for that. We'll probably see you again next year.
Ben, if I've learned anything so far early in this offseason, it's that you cannot say the Super Bowl was boring. It was just a fine Super Bowl. Congratulations to the Patriots, but don't call the Super Bowl boring. That's what I've learned so far.
I think it's fair to say that it wasn't an exceptionally exciting game.
No,
so
how dare you?
You can call it whatever you want. I know Trey Wingo was super upset about it. It's fine. We're allowed to say that you don't have to go so far as to complain about the game. I love the Super Bowl, but it just didn't live up to some of the, excitement that it does in other years. And I think that's fine to say without saying the game was garbage too.
Yes.
So,
but
anyways, AFC East, New England Patriots, it starts and ends with Tom Brady. At the beginning of the season, we had him listed as TF QB1, Total Foresight, the crown jewel of FantasyForesight.com. Mike Clay thought he was going to throw for 4,700 yards, 33 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. I mean, we were thinking this could be Tom's last season, and then all he did was just win another Super Bowl and talk about how he's going to do it again.
Yeah, he was coming off a 2017 campaign where he was first in yards, second in touchdowns, third in passer rating, fifth in yards per attempt. He was coming off a great season, and we thought this should continue. They can continue this run. And Mike Clay, I know, like you said, had him projected at 4,700 yards, 33 touchdowns, 8 picks. He finished the season with 4,300 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So a little off from Mike's numbers, but not off by a ton. I mean, Mike was pretty accurate by and large with what he expected out of Tom Brady, and we expected similar numbers. But here's the crazy thing. Even if Tom Brady had hit Mike Clay's projections on the head, he would have been QB6. And we thought those numbers would make him QB1 going into the season. That's more of a testament to some of the production we saw this year. People after the Super Bowl have been talking about how this season set a record in scoring, and that kind of played into some of the comments about the Super Bowl about how it was so low scoring. But this season was just bonkers with production, and I think this is testament to that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Tom Brady threw for over 4,300 yards, and yet New England finished 8th in passing.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The inflation of passing volume this year was crazy. And I don't know if it's more indicative of the current referees, and this is the trend that we're going to be seeing, or are we in line for regression next season?
Yeah, well, in part, especially for Tom, he finished as QB 14. Okay, so we have to admit we got that wrong to a certain extent because we were considering him to be QB 1 overall. And when you finish QB 14, that's a QB 2 level, so it was a disappointment. And some of that had to do with his receiving core. You have Josh Gordon come in and then he goes out, and you have Edelman suspended the first 4 games of the season. It just, you have to think that probably probably hampers a little bit of the passing game production. James White was a monster for him early on. They kind of went away from him late. Rex Burkhead was injured, who was going to be another passing down back. I mean, there was a lot of volatility in that receiving core.
Yeah, there was a revolving door in that backfield at times, and there wasn't that presence of a heavy, solid run game until later on in the season and into the playoffs.
Excellent point. You're right. And we'll get to some of these guys in a few minutes, but you're right. Sony Michel was banged up to start the season, so that made it difficult. Gronk missed 3 games. So again, that's just another target in that passing game who wasn't reliable for large parts of the season, and that just resulted in Tom having, well, still a great season. I mean, you think about all the volatility he had in that receiving core, and he still, like you said, put up over 4,300 yards. That's a very successful season, but as far as fantasy and what we expected coming into this season, it just wasn't to the level of compared to the rest of the league.
You're absolutely right. And in your notes here, you nail it when you say that the Patriots play to win, not to put up stats.
Yes.
And one of the main things that we have to watch for this offseason with this Patriots team is if they address the weapons for Tom Brady in the passing game. Because if all of a sudden this offense is such that the best chance for this team to win is to have a 60-40 pass spread, then watch out.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, let's get to a few teams that were not that interesting this season.
Yeah, we spent so much time on Tom because there's not much else to talk about.
The rest of this division was really a mess this year. You go to Miami, who at quarterback, Ryan Tannehill was entering the season, turning 30 with durability issues coming off of injury. We labeled him as do not touch. There are better options out there. We had him ranked as basically irrelevant in total foresight.
Yeah, we were right. We said do not touch Tannehill, and we nailed that one. We don't have to spend too much time on that. Adam Gase and his crazy eyes couldn't stand to see what he was looking at in Miami, yeah. And that's why he went on to.
Right.
So moving over to the Buffalo Bills, I mean, when we started the season, we were all talking about A.J. McCarron and right. His first shot at being a starting quarterback in the NFL, and that didn't last too long.
No, not at all. And we had Josh Allen ranked as QB 33 entering the season. McCarron didn't even finish, like you said, the season with the Bills as he was traded to the Raiders. And going into the season, we knew the O-line was bad. The Vegas outlook was bad for the team. Just from the quarterback perspective, we didn't have a whole lot of expectation as far as fantasy production. Again, we wanted to stay away with Josh Allen being a rookie. We wanted to have kind of a wait-and-see approach. But Allen did finish as QB 21 in total points and QB 21 in points per game. His passer rating was outside the top 50. It was all legs with him. His rushing rescued his fantasy relevancy. He was 4th in quarterback rushing attempts and 2nd in quarterback rushing yards. That's the only value he presented. Okay, so then we switch gears. We go to the next team in the division, the New York Jets. Again, another team in almost an identical situation where you have a veteran who has done something, and then you have the highly touted rookie who has done nothing, and who does the team go with? And at the time of our recording, we didn't know which way they were going to go to start the season. McCown, we had as total foresight QB 26. Sam Darnold, we had as QB 35. Both kind of irrelevant. QB 3s, off the radar, undraftable guys to just kind of take a wait-and-see approach like we've said on some other guys. Now, we did think that this team would fall behind and would have to throw the ball, so there could be some value, but we would much rather look elsewhere for that value. And our assessment was, once again, 100% accurate on this, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, just like the Buffalo Bills, but it is what it is.
And I know Darnold came in and was cutting his teeth in this league, very similar to Josh Allen, but the Jets finished with 25th in passing in the league. McCown played the first 4 games of the season and finished as QB bad. QB 48, points per game and total. So, I mean, it didn't even matter. Darnold came in, played the last 13 games of the season, finished QB 27, so much better, although he was QB 34 in points per game, but he was QB 49 in passer rating.
A lot of people a lot smarter than me really like Sam Darnold. I'll tell you what, from the sample size I saw, I did not see it.
Dude, in passer rating, he was behind Bortles, Keenum, and Brock.
Yeah, no. I am very suspect on Mr. Darnold going forward. Now, he's a young guy. He has got a lot of time to grow and mature, and better days could very well be ahead for him, but it is going to be a learning curve for guys coming into the NFL who don't have an abundance of college starting experience.
Well,
and that proved to be the case.
I completely agree with you. There are stats to back that up with number of snaps that guys see in college. But if you're telling me, like you said, a lot of people love Sam Darnold, they think he's going to turn out to be something great, and he very well may be. But when your QB passer rating is behind guys where teams are looking for another option now, they're looking for an excuse to go in another direction. I mean, I'm sorry, but again, that's going to be a wait and see for me heading into 2019.
No, without a doubt, it's going to be a stay away until further notice for me. So moving on to the more exciting running back position in this division, starting off, running back Sony Michel. I remember previewing this and we were all excited about him, and we just found out that he had that procedure to drain his knee, and there were concerns about that knee coming in. There were concerns about fumbles coming in. Now, the fumble concerns seem to be addressed. He only had one fumble loss this season, but he did only play in 13 games. So what do we say? You can't score me points if you're not in the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think we nailed this one too, because we were saying, we get it. He's a rookie. He's on the Patriots. They drafted him very early, and all the signs were pointing to it.
They had a top 5 running back strength of schedule paired with, like you said, a guy who was drafted highly by Bill Belichick, so who's going to have the say as to who gets the rock. There were injury concerns, and that's what we factor into total foresight too. That was our concern, was that, is this guy going to be durable? Like you said, if you're not going to score me points, you aren't worth anything to me. So when he did play, he was very solid, but again, going into next season, I need to see a preseason this year free of injury. That would make me feel much more comfortable drafting Sony Michel. He played wonderful late in the season, and I just want to see that he can play an entire season healthy.
And quite honestly, for him to truly be fantasy relevant, they're going to have to do something with James White, and I don't know if they're going to. James White is their niche pass catcher, and Sony Michel only had 7 receptions this season. And in a PPR league, that really moves the needle.
Okay, let's just talk about this. We both have an affinity for James White, all right? But they looked for any excuse to go away from him, and all the guy did was produce. Look, man, Angry Jay is coming back. Look, we're resetting. I was all calm. We entered last season just chill. I was going back listening to all these early episodes. Jay was super relaxed. I finished the season super fired up. And now you're getting me fired up again, because James White's my hero, man. The guy is a stud, and all they do is look for an excuse not to give him the rock. They want to use Rex Burkhead so bad and replace James White with him, and it makes 0 sense to me.
I agree. It doesn't make sense. And here's why. Number one, on the biggest stage several times before, James White has come through when they needed it the most. Number two, just watching the Patriots on offense this season, they look no better than when they were featuring James White and utilizing him and scheming the ball to him, and not, like you said, looking for every seeming excuse to go to Sony Michel or to Rex Burkhead or to Devlin or anybody else in the world other than James White.
He was RB7 overall, RB11 in points per game. He only got the rock to carry 94 times, turned that into 425 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had 87 catches on 123 targets for 751 yards and 7 scores. 0 fumbles. The guy is just reliable, man. I don't get it. He finished in PPR with almost 280 points. Sony Michel finished right around 140. Rex 50, Devlin 42. So Rex had health concerns coming in, durability concerns coming in. He proved once again why you can't count on him. And yet when he does come back and he's healthy, he just swoops right in and replaces James White, the one guy who is reliable on that team. Now look, I know they're the Patriots. They just won the Super Bowl for the umpteenth time, and I get it. And at the end of the day, like Coach says,
you play to win the game.
And I get that, but I just don't understand why you go away from James. I'm going to be so intrigued to see what happens in this backfield this offseason.
Well, the silver lining is that we called James White. A lot of people across the fantasy world were just stunned at James White's early season production. We
were talking about him being a steal in the 10th, Ben. A steal.
Oh, yeah. That's because he was going undrafted at the time we were discussing him. And we were saying now that, later in your draft, this guy is a must roster. And we knew that he was going to get all kinds of targets. He lived up to that billing. It's another one where he was one of our poster guys all season. And there were just some weeks where, like you said, for whatever reason, they didn't want to go his way. And quite honestly, those were a lot of the times where they either just didn't look good on offense, or they struggled altogether, or they took a loss, or whatever. But when they were humming along, the running back position was running through James White.
Yep. All right. Like you said, the point of this is to go back and see where we got it right and where we got it wrong. With James White, we absolutely got it right. We said he was an absolute steal. Please go draft him. And we nailed that at the time of our recording.
And if he's there next year, he's got that standalone flex value from day one, just like he did this year.
At least he'll be healthy and he'll be there when everybody falls around beside him. So
absolutely.
Rex, on the other hand, he was being drafted in the 70s, and he was one of the bigger disappointments. So there's a little bit of a bust there. We had him ranked as RB22 at that time before he went down with injury. So he was just one of those guys with concern. He didn't live up to his billing. And Sony Michel, I'd kind of call a push. We knew the injury concern going in. Did he finish RB10 overall? No, he did not. But when he was in the game and when he played, he was great. He had plenty of production, 931 yards, 6 scores. So good production. I'd call Sony Michel a push. Rex, again, you got to trust health. You got to look at health when building your team going into the season. Now,
yeah, so far the only losses I see on this list are Rex and Tom.
Now,
that's it.
The rest of this division, Ben.
They are who we thought they were.
That's pretty much it, man. I mean, You look at the backfield, just these offenses. We wanted to look for value. We wanted to look. Somebody had to score points. Somebody had to get carries and rushing yards. Somebody had to have receiving yards.
Except they didn't.
Except they didn't. They were just bad teams, man. Miami finished 18th in rushing. All right, Frank Gore, we had going into the season as RB29. His ADP was in the 150s. He was barely being drafted. Drake, we had ranked as RB42. Clay had him as a back-end RB2. His ADPs were in the 40s, which we thought was way too rich. Drake actually finished RB14 and RB21 in points per game. So in PPR, he ended up having a pretty decent season. So, and then Kalen Ballage actually had a couple good games late in the season. And, we talked about it and we laughed about it because I mispronounced his name early in the season. Even though he was an athletic freak, he actually put up 123 yards in week 15. So again, this is a backfield going into next season. You would think old man Gore is probably going to step away at this point. Drake will be the man. Ballage will then back him up, and that could be an interesting tandem because
it could.
Drake's got some value there. I think we underestimated what he could be in total for the season. But, I'm looking at this stat here, Ben. The crazy thing is that Frank Gore outgained Drake 722 to 535 on the ground, but Drake just crushed him through the air, racking up 477 receiving yards to Gore's 124. And then this is where Drake really hit the home run. Was he had 9 touchdowns to Gore's 1.
Yeah. Next year, Drake and Balaj could really be a couple of complementary backs.
Yeah.
It could really be a Kamara Ingram type of usage over there, with Drake being such a heavy pass catcher in that offense and Balaj being such a heavy between the tackles goal line type of running back build. And now we got to see what that team's going to look like, what that offense is going to look like.
All right, I'm going to start speeding this up a little. We go to the Buffalo backfield, and it was dreadful. With LaShawn McCoy coming in, we knew that there was an injury concern. That was number one with him. But that was baked into his ADP, and he was going 26 to 30. He actually was coming in after having played all 16 games in 2017. But wow, I don't know how this backfield finished 9th in the league in rushing.
Because of Josh Allen.
You're right. McCoy played 14 games. He finished with 127 PPR points. That's good enough for RB 39. It just for somebody drafted in the second to third round in drafts, that's a bust right there.
Yeah.
Chris Ivory also played 13 games. He finished with 78 PPR points. That is just irrelevant. So this backfield really just did not have the production that warranted really any type of draft investment.
No, and I remember being pretty lukewarm and hedging our bets in our analysis when it comes to him, because we were definitely not coming into the season saying, oh yeah, make sure you definitely go out of your way to draft Shady McCoy this year.
Yeah, we thought he'd have safe volume, which he did when he played. I'm not going to knock the guy. He only missed 2 games. He had 161 carries for 514 yards, a 3.2 yards per carry clip. It was just a mediocre year. That offense was bad, like we talked about, and I really don't want to talk about it anymore. All right, going to the Jets. Going into the season, Elijah McGuire was hurt. So we had that going into the season. Some guy that some people were excited about, already down with injury. They had a bad O-line, although they did have a good strength of schedule. Crow, we had ranked as RB 42. Mike Clay had him ranked as RB 30. He was going in the 80s to 90s. Ben liked him with an RB 2 with upside. We talked about how he was overvalued in his final year with Cleveland, and because of that disappointing season, he was being undervalued heading into this season. Where did he finish up? Well, the team was dreadful. They finished 26th in rushing. The offense was bad. Crow played in 13 games. He had 143 carries, 685 yards. That was good for 140 PPR points and RB 33 overall. So not great. Actually, you know what? You look at his production, Ben, and he outgained Shady McCoy. Let's see.
At RB 33, you're flex worthy in 12-team leagues.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It didn't really live up to maybe what we were expecting out of him, but as RB 42 and he finished as RB 33, he did kind of exceed our total foresight expectation.
And again, anytime teams change coaches and anytime there's a shift in an organization, it's always something to pay attention to, because I do think that there was some truth to the fact that he was overvalued in 17 and undervalued in 18. And I don't know what that team's going to look like next year, but somebody, depending on his ADP, I'm guessing it's going to be lower than the 80s to 90s ADP that it was last year. And then so if you're talking about a running back in the, 11th, 12th, 13th round that has any chance of being an impact player,
sure,
I'll take a look at that.
Like you said, if you can get a starter in that range, and he would have been a flex starter for teams in 12-team formats or deeper, then yeah, I'm with you, man. He could be a nice sneaky play and a reliable play late in drafts this year. Now, Elijah McGuire, Bilal Powell, Elijah played in 8 games, Powell played in 7 games. They just weren't reliable from a fantasy perspective, so just kind of bust. They just never got in and could score with consistent points, and not much really to say there.
No, there's not. Now, at the wide receiver position in the AFC East, I think we need to save the best for last on this one with that Super Bowl MVP over there in New England. Let's go to the two teams that were extremely disappointing in this division, which was the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. To start off, Miami, no wide receivers in the top 50 in PPR.
That's just crazy.
Not one player, in that wide receiver core was even flex worthy in 12-team PPR formats. Now, the first thing I thought when I saw that note, Jay, was watch out for regression, because that cannot happen twice. There's no way.
You would not think
positive
so.
regression.
And we were excited about Stills. I think we both saw the value in Kenny Stills this season. And in week 1, he lit it up and we were like, boom, nailed it. And then just the consistent look, we talked about the quarterback situation and it was dreadful. They had terrible quarterback play. They could run the ball and they just did not need to rely on their receivers. They tried to just win with defense, slowing games down, and it ruined their wide receiver values. But you look at this, none of their receivers played in all 16 games either. They had health issues. Devontae Parker played in 11 games. Kenny Stills missed a game. Danny Amendola missed a game. Albert Wilson missed 9 games. So, it was a wide receiving core in flux, and it was very disappointing, I gotta say.
You're absolutely right. And one thing that I'm sure they all learned down there in Miami this year is to put some respect on Jarvis Landry's name. Thanks.
Right? I think he outproduced
all
those guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're loving old Chiefs up here in Cleveland. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, all those people who said he wasn't worth the money, take a look at what Miami's wide receiving core did this year and then tell me what he's worth.
Yes, sir. And it wasn't much better in Buffalo.
Oh, God.
I mean,
no, it wasn't.
Man, Kelvin Benjamin. Wow. I couldn't have been more wrong about Kelvin Benjamin. I was pretty fired up. His ADP, the price was right. I mean, it was 115 to 120, and he
played all of 17 injured. He was coming back. There was some trash talk between him and his former teammates. He seemed motivated to prove everybody wrong and to bounce back. And instead of doing that, he just went to KFC every day. And it turns out didn't go to practice and wasn't very good on the football field and ended the season not on the team. So, but
when you hear about these type of stories, I just do not understand it. How do you just throw away and just like seemingly give up on your NFL career? It makes no sense to me.
I don't get it either. And they had Zay Jones, who came in with some off the field issues coming into the season, and we just thought, somebody's got to catch balls in this offense. I mean, like, a team is going to score points no matter how bad they are, so somebody has to have some type of fantasy value. We thought it was going to be Kelvin Benjamin, and it ended up being just nobody on this offense.
Yeah. It was a season to forget in fantasy football for anybody paying any type of attention to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. Now, Zay Jones had an okay season. Robert Foster came on late in the season. So we'll see what we think of these guys heading in to 2019. But as far as 2018 went, not fantasy relevant.
I'm going to say right now, there's a lot that can happen between now and our preview pod apps, between now and the start of next season. But Robert Foster is a guy that I'm keeping my eye on. I'll just say that.
Now, the Jets, again, another anemic offense. Robbie Anderson, we had ranked as WR28 coming into the season, very similar to Mike Clay's WR33. His ADP was in the 90s. We didn't think he was going to be suspended coming into the season, as the NFL had bigger fish to fry, which ended up being true. He did play 14 games, managed 156 PPR points. He was W39 overall, W43 in points per game. Pretty much right where we kind of expected him to be on that WR3 level. Now, I kind of hoped he had been more, but going into the season with question marks at the quarterback position, that you can't expect some kind of great volume to lead your fantasy team. So he was just going to be an accessory to your team, a nice ancillary piece for your bench or possibly a flex position, and that's exactly what he was. Quincy Enunwa, he was banged up, played 11 games, managed 87 points. Jermaine Kearse played 14 games, managed 80 points, just not fantasy relevant. But I do want to give you credit, Ben. When we had this discussion in the preseason, TP was on the team, and we both wondered, all right, TP's finally healthy. He says that he was so injured. He had this monster season in Cleveland. What can he do on a Jets team that is desperate for talent at the wide receiver position? He's a dynamic guy. And what you said was that his performance in Cleveland was an absolute aberration and will never be repeated again in the NFL. And you know what, man? You were 100% correct. Congrats to you.
I appreciate it. I watched TP far too close. I watched Hugh Jackson far too close. The combination of those two together made a perfect storm of fakeness that just, that's all it was. And I wish TP the best, but it didn't work out with the Jets, and I will be surprised if it works out anywhere else going forward.
All right, so now we got to take a lump, both you and I. The New England wide receiving corps. Edelman was suspended coming into the season. His ADP was in the 60s. He was 32 years old and coming off an injury to start the season as well, which was just not a good formula. An older wide receiver coming off of injury, suspended. I mean, who's going to draft that guy in the 60s in drafts? We thought he was overvalued at that price point. He could present some value when he came back, but we wanted to kind of have more of a wait-and-see approach or get some more value for him, and we called Hogan the one receiver to own. Now, at that time, they did not have Josh Gordon. That was not on the radar at that point in the preseason. So we thought Hogan was the one to own in this offense. Boy, could we not have been more wrong about that one. After serving his 4-game suspension, Edelman finished WR23 in PPR, WR15 in points per game, man. I mean, he came back and tore it up. 850 yards, 6 touchdowns, 108 targets. Dude.
Time out. Why did that happen? That happened because Gronk was not the normal Gronk. Right. 6 touchdowns in 12 games is not consistent with the career-long sample size of Julian Edelman.
No, you're right.
So a lot of his production when he came back were those touchdowns. And now while we were definitely wrong about Hogan, we didn't think he was going to be as irrelevant as he ended up being. And then the whole world thought Josh Gordon was going to make good on his 17th opportunity when he got traded by the Cleveland Browns to the New England Patriots. And that didn't happen either. So who was the only steady Eddie guy around? Who was the only one that could stay healthy, keep his nose clean, and actually make some plays? It was Julian Edelman.
All right, Ben.
So
how's this for
all I'm saying is this offense could look very different next year, and I do not like Julian Edelman to be as much of a touchdown maker next year as he was this year.
Only one receiver scored more than 100 fantasy points in PPR on that New England offense, and it was Julian Edelman, and he only played 12 games. So
I love Edels, you know that, but I'm just saying
I just did
we gotta make sure that we are viewing what happened accurately.
Yes.
And I don't think anybody expected Gronk or Hogan to be as underutilized or as ineffective as they were, and both may well be replaced going into next year.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, we were led to believe that Gronk was fully healthy entering the season, and we had high expectations, and that's a great segue because we're going to dive into tight ends, and Gronk was really the only tight end worth talking about in this division. We had him ranked as tight end 2. Mike Clay had him as tight end 1 overall. He was projected at 130 targets, man. And it just, you know what? He was on the TB12 program, and apparently the Patriots were not happy about that because he had nagging injuries all season. He couldn't shake them. He looked like, when he was running at times, he looked like Tom Brady running out there. I'm not trying to make light of the situation. I'm just stating facts.
Nope. When he ran, sometimes he looked like Phillip Rivers. He looked that bad running.
It was
like Woody from Toy Story running. Like Gronk was, like you said, projected for 130 targets. He got almost half that at 72.
Yeah.
So it's clear that all of the injuries, all of the surgeries, all of the pounding that Gronk has taken over the years has taken its toll. And I am going to be absolutely shocked if Gronk doesn't retire.
Well, look, and we've talked about it before, and we've heard former players say it, that when that doubt, that thought of retirement creeps into your mind, that's the time to hang it up, man. Because
when you start telling me it doesn't matter, then retire. Get out.
At the end of the day, you can't have that doubt in your mind and walk onto that field and play that game. So, like you said, man, if you're thinking about it, it's time. You can't take that chance. He didn't look right all season. It just wasn't there. He was projected to have 130 targets. He had 130 points, man.
This is what I will say about Gronk that earned my respect, though. You could tell that he enjoyed the game just as much being an outstanding blocker for his team as he did being one of the focal points of that offense. While he lost a step and he's not the dynamic playmaker that he once was. If you watch those games, he was a stud beast blocking, and I did appreciate that about him. But yeah, from a fantasy perspective, his relevant days are behind us, unfortunately. And that's a shame because he was one of the best fantasy tight ends to ever play.
You're right. And I don't want to crap on the guy. He was an outstanding player for a very long time. And I'll be honest, in the playoffs, he stepped up and he looked like he was finally right again. He looked more like the Gronk of old. He was out catching balls and making great plays. And you're right. He was doing a great job blocking for Tom Brady. 1 sack in the entire run in the playoffs. I mean, that's a heck of a job by that O-line. And Gronkowski, like you said, was a part of that blocking scheme. And, I got to give the guy credit. But I'm with you. I would be shocked if he came back next season. Now, the rest of this division, the tight ends. None of them were fantasy relevant. We were excited to see what Mike Gesicki could be. We knew he needed to learn the pro game. We knew he needed to do what Gronk did. Learn how to block. Learn to play in pass protection. He played in all 16 games and had 40 fantasy points. He is a work in progress. That is a wait and see, not relevant. Charles Clay, we thought, hey, he's kind of a boring tight end 1, but he can be outstanding at times. He can light it up. He played in 13 games. He finished with less fantasy points than Jason Kroom. Do you know who that is? Exactly. Right. Man, this division at the tight end position is dreadful. The only bright spot is Chris Herndon, the 4th. He was the lone bright spot. He played in 14 games, managed 113 PPR points, and a respectable 8 points per game. So at the tight end position, we talked about it all season long, the volatility and the crazy scoring. It was low across the board for most weeks, so anybody could jump out and be a TE1 for the week. And for Herndon to average 8 points, that's a respectable job. That's a nice tight end 1, back end, albeit, but nice consistent production at that level for fantasy teams. And he wasn't even on our radar going into the season.
I mean, yeah, Herndon definitely flashed. He's definitely somebody to pay attention to going into next season, depending on what they do on their roster at the tight end position. But overall, tight ends are very disappointing in the AFC East, and we will be looking at other divisions and other teams for our tight ends going into 2019 as of right now.
Absolutely. So, hey, man, that does it. I look at this. There were a couple spots where he got it wrong. Edel's really jumps off the page, but by and large, our expectations were pretty accurate. We wanted to find value in these offenses, but at the end of the day, they just weren't good teams. And that's a lesson learned. When you have big question marks at quarterback and how teams are going to move the ball and score, those are not players you want to rely on your fantasy team. And lesson learned, you want to find value, but sometimes it's better to find it somewhere else.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is just the first half of our off-season preparation. The first half is going to be us coming to you every Friday with Fantasy Foresight Fridays, talking about what happened division by division. And then when we're done with that, we are going to shift our focus completely to 2019, and we'll be looking at the prospects in the NFL draft, all the free agency trades, whatever, and we'll be gearing to go for 2019. I mean, it's crazy to say, man, draft time is only 5 months away.
Yeah.
We're sitting here planning our off-season schedule like we've got all the time in the world, but there's only so many weeks between now and the time that you better really be knowing what's going on with your draft.
Hey, the work never stops. It's always fantasy football season. The preparation never stops. We've got exciting things for you. We've got audio clips to add to the podcast this year. We're throwing up our podcast on YouTube. If you're listening in, hopefully you enjoyed seeing all the stats while you were listening so you could see what we were talking about. We're trying to build this thing and make it more fun, more interesting for you always. And before we let you go, Ben, I'm going to toot my own horn, man. The last and final competition of this fantasy football season was the Scott Fish Playoff League. And yours truly, my friend, came out on top. I was hoping you were going to bring it up, but you know what? I'll pat myself on the back. I don't mind.
I was just about to.
But hey, it was a great way to end the 2018 season. I love that we're kicking this off and going through, and I'm excited to continue our preparation. I hope everybody out there is too. Let's continue to see what we did wrong, learn from it, apply it, and move forward and go win some championships.
Yeah, congrats to you on the Scott Fish Bowl, man. That's a real nice way to end a very long and at times very frustrating season. And we're looking forward to keeping you prepared, keeping you up to date in the off season, and be ready to hit 2019 running.
Yeah, enjoy the episode. Next week, we'll be back with the NFC East review.
Nice.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. Don't forget, you can find us at fantasyforesight.com.
And you can use the links at the bottom of the page to find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at ForesightBen, at ForesightJ, and at Total Foresight. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
You already found this podcast, but you can find it on Google Play and iTunes, and you can find our app in the App Store.
All right, that does it for us. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks a lot, and have a great night.